We are now recording. Well then, uh, Mr. Mathias Gran, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself for the audience.
Yes, my name is Matthias Gran. I'm a friend of Alex's, and excited to learn more about him today. I wear many hats professionally, but the one that I'm most passionate about is developing adults into adults who they are proud to be. And a lot of that work revolves around um, psychology, feelings, and specifically, I'm trying to make workplaces a little more engaging and tolerable. And I wouldn't say a little more, I would say a lot more. And working with leaders who understand that when people feel amazing and respected and heard at the office, they're more likely to be able to work through challenges, take risks, and really push organizations forward. So I'm hoping to be able to share my perspectives and influence in the world to make workplaces better for everyone.
All right, that's definitely a noble goal. So then, I would like to ask you, how did you get to where you are now?
How did I get to where I am now? I think this question has so many layers. I would expect that to be true for almost everyone. My path is definitely nonlinear, and it's almost confusing to me when I meet someone who claims to have a linear path because I don't think that's really how it works. But I know some people do it. Some people wake up and they say, I want to be an accountant, and then they go be an accountant, and then they retire. And that's never how I experienced the world. And so I got here with many twists and turns. Um, I never really felt like I fit with my skills and perspectives, even from a very young age. And so most of my life has been spent trying to find where I'm supposed to be. And I've sort of come to accept that I might be best at making opportunities rather than finding opportunities. So I'm connecting to my entrepreneurial roots and branching out again. But my path was definitely it's characterized by constant change, whether that's professionally, personally, um, and I'm grateful for it. But it's also been really challenging.
All right, so it's who you are and how you got to where you are now. Then, and by the way, I hadn't really considered that. Yeah, as most stories don't exactly. They tend to meander. Most people's do anyway.
Mhm.
And then there's those people who wake up and say, I'm going to be an accountant, and proceed to do just that.
Exactly. I mean, you're an engineering major, so tell me a little bit about how you arrived at that decision.
Uh, well, once upon a time, I myself wanted to own a business. And then I realized I didn't really have any business plan. But at that point, I was already a year into becoming an engineer. So I thought, screw it. I'll finish becoming an engineer and figure out where to go from there. Yeah.
Perfect. So pre-business is how we used to joke. I started at Iowa State University in engineering, and it's an engineering school, and so all of us freshman engineering majors would joke that it was actually a pre-business major that we'd all end up there eventually.
I was thinking of dropping and becoming an accountant when I was struggling with calculus too. Rather thankful I didn't at
Yes.
this point because, well, I should be graduating very shortly.
But you made it through. You stuck with engineering.
Indeed.
So you made it through Calc 2, you made it through Calc 3.
Yeah. And probability in statistics 1 and 2.
Amazing.
All I need
So
left
a
is
funny
differential
story with
equations.
me. Oh, I'm sorry, say that again.
All I need left is differential equations, and yep.
Oh yeah. Diffie Q. So a funny story about Calc 2. I also started at an engineering school and thought I was going to be an engineer. I started in chemical engineering. Um, and then ironically, I switched to mechanical engineering because I thought chemical engineering wasn't creative enough. And so I, uh, I found myself in a different level of creative work. And I don't mean that in a dig against engineering. It's just, I thought that mechanical engineers would spend all day like coming up with with cool creative designs, and it turned out to be a lot more of an execution role than a creation role. And I've met some engineers who do design work, and they seem to be very fulfilled by that. But for me, very early on, I was like, I need to do something that's less mechanically uh, focused on execution and more on discovery. So to go back to the beginning, when I got admitted to Iowa State and started as an engineering major, I tested into Calc 2, and I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my undergraduate experience because I took AP Calculus in high school and I enjoyed it and I was decent at it. I was good enough to obviously test out of Calc 1, but collegiate Calc 1 versus high school AP Calc is just wildly different. Not from the subject perspective, but from the experience perspective. And so here I was, this 18-year-old kid in advanced math at an engineering school with 300 kids in a lecture hall. And I didn't know, I had no study skills. I didn't know how to be successful. And I failed Calc 2 miserably my freshman fall. And the only reason why I passed it the next time around was that the professor threw out your lowest exam score. And I happened to have an A going into the midterm. And that's when I stopped learning things, was exactly halfway through the semester. And so I was able to throw out my final exam, which I failed boldly. But that's how I got a B in Calc 2, was getting half the semester done and failing the second half of the semester. Just had a forgiving professor. And I knew that there was no way I was going to do Calc 3 at that point. But ironically, I ended up being one course away from a math minor. So I know I could do it now, but back then there was no way I was going to be successful.
Yeah. I actually had a bit of a similar story to AP Calc in high school.
Uh-huh.
And indeed, do wonder if it would have been better off if they hadn't accepted that transfer credit.
Exactly. I think going to college is hard enough transition as it is, that to put yourself in the most advanced class you test into, it, I think it only works if you're already a good student. And I don't mean that from a brains perspective. I mean it from a diligence perspective. At least for me, I found that I really struggled as an undergrad, and it's because I happened to be gifted enough that I never had to put any effort into academics until college. And so I literally did not know how to learn at the college level. I had to learn how to learn when I made it to college. And that was incredibly demoralizing. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
Oh boy, did I.
Tell me about it.
Well, like I said, it's rather demoralizing to fail out of calculus, though less so when you actually do pass it the next time. And if my memory serves, it's rather demoralizing to have to retake probability theory and statistics 3 times.
Yeah.
I got an F, and then I got an F, and then I took it over the summer as an online class, and I got an A.
There you
I
go.
still have no idea how I managed to get an A in that class.
Well, the good news is, if you're good with concepts, I don't. You can always find out the details later. I think that's the biggest difference between the academic world and the real world. Is it's important that you know how to figure things out. It's less important to know what you know. And when I was in graduate school, I had never taken a statistics course, and it was part of my requirements for my MBA. And in my cohort of 40-ish people, every class they would give out 3 A pluses to like the top 3 students, and I ended up getting an A plus in the probability and statistics course in graduate school, which was a total shock to me. And we had a guest speaker come to class who does sports analytics with the Indiana Pacers, and we ended up chatting in the hallway afterwards. He was pretty interesting to talk to, and my professor was there with us. So it was my professor and me and this sports analyst. And we were just having a great conversation, and I had revealed in part of the conversation I'd never taken statistics before, and my professor like looked at me with the biggest shocked face because I had earned the plus. You know, I had earned the A plus, the elusive, you know, the top three students, having never looked at the subject before, um, but I understood what I needed to know to be able to execute statistics. And I think now when I use statistics in real life, you know, I'm sure you've done more things in stats than I might ever, but I still know enough that I can go have the right context to go look at the problem if I need to.
Yeah, it's my understanding of what it. Well, actually, for an IE, depending on entirely what I do, it's entirely possible that I could be just trying to do market analysis prediction or something. There's a slight issue in that there's so many things that an industrial engineer could realistically be applied to that perhaps a slight bit of analysis paralysis with what exactly I should do.
I get it. I get it. And I think your choice of words in should is very, very interesting. Um, Tell me about why that word's important.
Well, I remember when you were introducing yourself, I don't believe we recorded that. We were just talking.
Mhm.
But said about how we all change the world. Oh, I'd like to leave it a little bit better off than I found it. So,
Sure. So your should, if I'm hearing you correctly, your should includes an inquiry around how can I set myself up to make the biggest impact?
would be nice to do something good for the public.
Yeah. And where does that drive come from, Alex?
I suppose the concept that life is, aside from the singular goal of replicating the genetic information that you possess, which, being human, I am decidedly not interested in, I would like to build a life that I would like to live. And I
Okay.
can tell you right now, the world that I am currently living in is mildly inconducive to the life that I would like to live. So,
Okay,
yes.
there's a lot going on there. Please build on that further. So I think I heard you say that you want to find a way to live the life that you want to live, and the life you're living or the world you're living in, I can't remember what you said, one of those two, is not conducive to that. Tell me more about that.
Well, uh, what generation am I in? 23 puts me in. Um, what are the generational divides again? I forget.
Are you Gen Z or are you Alpha? Let's find out.
I don't think I'd be quite young enough for Alpha. I think I'd probably be Gen Z, though maybe later on in that. I'd have to look at the
Let's see
division.
here. Gen Z is born from 97 to 2012.
Well, I
So
am
you're
apparently
probably
Gen Z then.
solidly Gen Z. Yeah.
Yeah, so, just dealing with the impending climate crisis and Social Security is probably going to self destruct, and the United States
Mhm.
is one of the only is the only developed country in the world without free universal health care, and a
Mhm.
hundred other things which I would have been completely fine if I was born in Europe.
Global warming still affects Europe, though, so you can't run from that.
Well, at least in terms of
Uh,
politics. But
yeah,
uh,
yeah. So I hear you saying that you feel incredibly insecure about what the world might be like when you start to age. Is that fair?
yep,
And that you see the systems around you that have supported other generations as likely to be less effective if they exist at all. Are you also saying that?
part of it. Being frank, I'm an engineer. I'm a very logical person, and I look at
Yeah.
all of the decisions that are being made to guide the world into whatever it's going to look like. And I can tell you that a lot of them are If you're trying to generate a whole lot of money in a very short amount of time, they are the correct decisions. If you are trying to
Hmm.
keep the world habitable for the human race of the future, they are
Hmm.
generally objectively the wrong ones.
Yeah, you're hitting on a really strong tension that I also relate to in business. And in that we've historically run organizations through the lens of what works on the spreadsheet. And there's so many dynamics that just don't show up in a convenient formula, even if you're using something advanced from Calc 3 or DiffyQ, um, or plop a nice machine learning algorithm on top of a large data set. It just doesn't capture the complexity. And part of the work that I'm doing now is trying to help these leaders and decision makers connect to more of our neurology and psychology, because those things don't show up on the spreadsheet, but they indirectly impact the things that do.
Yeah.
And
As a,
so you're hitting on some, sorry, go for it.
I was just gonna say, I suppose what looks good for business isn't always good for business.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Short-term gains do not always predict long-term gains. And I can't remember the statistic, but it's easy to find. There's something about, the percentage of organizations that last 20 years, 50 years, 75 years, 100 years. It's a cliff at every major milestone, because organizations typically are built for now, and they really struggle to be built for then. And a lot of that has to do with our inefficiencies, or not inefficiencies, our lack of skill as human beings to be able to look at a complex situation and then imagine that complex situation further down the road. Isn't there the famous study that we can own phone numbers are only 10 digits long, because that's how many most people can remember, and the area code's a given, so it's really seven. If we think about how handicapped we all are based on our limited brains, and imagine that simple metaphor being applied to the complexities of environmental impacts and social disruption and social inequity, our feeble minds just can't keep up. And so I'm very in agreement with you that it is dissatisfying where we find ourselves at this point in time. And I think if we give ourselves as a species a little grace, I think it might open up possibilities for us to look at these challenges without 100% through the lens of frustration, and more through the lens of opportunity. Uh, but I will admit that that's a struggle that I experience every day, and part of the reason why I find drive to want to make an impact in organizations.
Yeah. So easy to keep in there and just keep doing the same bloody thing, especially when the consequences of your action are moving inches per year. And of
Yeah,
course, then you don't really notice when it finally sneaks up on you.
yeah. And I think if you look at the challenge of global warming, it hasn't been sneaking up on people who understand at least the science that we have. It's such a politically polarizing topic, which is shocking to me, as a science capable human. But I think it's important to also look at that lens of being a science capable human and say, we have historically also not known enough always. Our science is constantly evolving, and we consistently and repeatedly discover that we don't have the whole picture. And a good, mature scientist understands that we're playing with whatever partial deck that we have access to. But the really driven ones are going out there looking for ways to fill the deck more. So, I think we can look back even in the last century and look at how much, even in your grandfather's generation, how much science pushed forward, how much we gained from a knowledge perspective on applying this really simple rubric of statistics and repeatable outcomes. it was revolutionary. And in doing that learning, we destroyed a lot of things. We gave people cancer. We destroyed species. We made pretty poor conclusions that affected people all the way along the whole way. So I think it's important to look at scientific perspective through a reverse lens that says we are probably missing something, but that doesn't mean we have to throw out the things that we're holding now. It just means that for every advancement, we need to be cognizant of what we might be doing on accident and try to minimize that impact.
Yeah, does remind me of it's from Jurassic Park, isn't it? The scientists were so focused on whether or not they could, they didn't focus on whether or not they should.
Exactly. Yeah. What a great moment. I think Jeff Goldblum was sort of one of my heroes as a kid for that role. That he's the smarts in the room that's challenging the momentum, challenging the status quo. I feel like that character was
Actually, I
important
don't
for
think
me
I've
as a
seen the
kid.
movie. I think I've only read the book, which I'm told
Oh
is
my
actually a bit
goodness.
different from the movie, and actually the movie assigned the actual canon for the next novel as well, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, the book was very different. Yeah, they were different media, but fun either way. But yeah, you should check it out. You should check out the original Jurassic
Yeah, I
Park.
probably should. Something I'll watch eventually, probably, maybe.
Oh man, I don't know that I will. You'll be impressed with the CGI because that was revolutionary technology. I remember when my dad was telling me how Star Wars was revolutionary with the space battles and the TIE fighters and the X-Wings. And if you go back and watch, episode four, the original Star Wars, A New Hope, um, those action scenes are so slow for modern standards. It is painful to watch a TIE fighter battle. Uh, but Jurassic Park, I think, is the same. You got these green screened or computer animated dinosaurs. It's like, oh, that's where we were. That's where technology was at that time. Toy Story hadn't even come out yet, if I'm right.
Yeah, I think Toy Story was what, 2001? That seems about right to me.
Let's let's figure this out. IMDb, Jurassic Park, 1993. And Toy Story, I feel like it was 96.
96.
95.
95?
95.
No, yeah,
Yep.
no, that doesn't
So,
seem right. That movie is older than
so,
me by 5 years.
so we had never had a full length feature computer animated film until Toy Story, and Jurassic Park was made before that. So it'll be interesting to go back and see the computer animation.
Well, you don't need to go back. You just need to go to the theaters. Have you seen Avatar: Way of Water? I mean, even compared to
I
just
haven't seen any of the Avatar stuff.
well, if I remember correctly, didn't I think James Cameron had to basically develop a bunch of underwater cinematography in order to be able to film that movie. Not to mention the CGI aspects of it. And going back
Got
to
it.
development, Lucas, uh, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Um, George Lucas, didn't they have to develop a bunch of the technology that they used even when filming Star Wars as well to get the scenes right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, LucasArts, like the studio, came out of that they created this new way, and it at that time, it was still very analog, so they had to figure out ways to rotate a camera to give the effect that the ship was spinning, but it was really the camera that was spinning, and the ship was stationary. So they developed all these really intricate camera interactions to create the illusion of movement in zero G. And yeah, so a lot of his technology came out as it was the only way they could do it at the time, and so he built all these structures to make it happen. If my knowledge is correct, I could be wrong, but that's what I remember.
Something like that. Yeah. When we when we want something done, we'll get it done. That is something I can rely on for, well, in general for humanity. if I remember correctly, it was end of World War II. Now I'm going to go ahead and look this up. World War II was from 1945, and moon landing was in 1965.
I want to
So
say 69 was the
or
landing.
1969.
Yep.
So that was 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
25 years from having never sent anyone to space before, and then planting flags on the moon.
Yeah. No, I still think, you're plucking my heartstrings here. I still think the moon landing was probably um, the greatest feat in human history because, I mean, the layers of insanity, it's, I just can't fathom what it would have taken to strap me into that capsule. Here you're going on top of a ballistic missile. You and your buddies are going to shit in a can for the next 2 weeks, or 5 days, whatever, however long they're on that mission, um, while you're being hurtled through space at tens of thousands of miles per hour, launched off of essentially a converted nuclear missile. Um,
Yeah.
all of it was impossible, and
Yeah.
yeah, that acceleration in technology in that short time span. They didn't even start the space race until after World War II,
Yeah, I
until
think,
after
what was it, like
the
maybe
middle of the
2 years or
Cold
something like that? And even then, they just start sending out these derpy little sounding rockets, which are just tin cans with a rocket engine strapped to them, and barely any
War.
avionics, or none at all. And then, so it's more like 23 years, realistically speaking.
Hmm.
Just shy of a generation to go from unguided warhead that weren't even more of a threat to the user than whatever your intended target is, to
Hmm.
being able to do Apollo. And with
Oh yeah.
hardware and software that is uh, consider your phone, which is probably sitting in your pocket or out on your desk or something,
Hmm.
that has significantly more computational power than what they were using to do the entirety of the Apollo program.
Oh yeah. I mean, to make it even more compelling, my dad told me when he was in school, he bought a four function calculator for $100 in 1977. Like, so in today's money, that $100 would be a laptop or two laptops, and it did multiplication and division, and that technology was advanced. So when I was in high school and we were using graphing calculators, I don't even know if you use those anymore. If you just do it all in computers now, but
I got a T84. I've used
yeah,
graphing
there you
calculator
go.
plenty.
Yeah, I got a TN92 in the closet. I just don't have the heart to get rid of it because I spent so many hours struggling through calculus on it. Um, but he was just in awe. My dad was in awe of my graphing calculator because he's like, that has more computing power than what took Apollo to the moon. And I remember watching some documentary, and they were talking about how one of the first sort of natural language computer programming interfaces was invented for the Apollo mission, and they only had like 20 keys or something on this interface, and you got these big bulky astronaut gloves, and you got to tell the ship to do something, and so
Yeah, if my
they
memory serves, they had like a verb, noun, and then uh, a bunch of numbers. I think there was like a reset and stuff like that.
yeah, so it was like a value, a noun, and a verb. And so you got these three key combos that allowed the astronauts to give instructions to the machine, and that had to be invented. That never existed before. Whereas if you've done any programming, now it's hard to imagine not using some sort of language like construct to give commands.
Yeah, I played around. I took introduction to computer programming, so
Hmm.
Visual Basic. Played around with that, made some
Yep.
software. Software for whatever Hello World and a little video. Not even a little game. It was just actually no, it was a little game. But yeah,
Yeah, I think we built like Wheel of Fortune or something in my VB class back in the day.
it,
There you had to pick
it's
some simple game.
it was basically like the board Game of Life or thereabouts. Simple enough ish to program. Honestly, the hardest thing was getting it to do this little. Have you ever seen like ACI graphics of a map?
AC. Oh, ASCII? Yeah, yeah,
ASCII.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hardest thing was they basically told us to make a thing that can read a file and turn that into an ASCII map. That was the hardest thing,
Okay.
actually, because I had to get to them to
So,
load in the colors and all that.
got it. So you needed to somehow translate. You built a topographical map essentially, like with different textures and different icons or different characters for different symbols.
Yeah, I think there was water. Uh, I don't remember if there were different. No, you could change the background to cell color. That could be either
Yep.
like water, mountain, or forest, and you could have an
Sure.
X which represented a city, and there was a basic
Sure.
function which allowed cities to grow,
Okay.
and then you could
That's fun.
use it as a basic editor for the map file, so you could save and load maps.
That's fun.
Wonder if I still have the skills to do that because I haven't touched computer programming in about 4 years.
I mean, I love it. So I didn't share a lot in the intro, but I said I wear many hats. I don't know if that was in the recording or not, but
Don't think you have.
my my one of my skills is that I was a professional software engineer for about a decade, and I'm self-taught. So back when I was in third grade, um, I got access to a green screen Apple II computer that would be wheeled around on a cart. And so there was one computer for the whole elementary school. And I really wanted to play with it. I was very curious about it. And I remember turning it on, and there was just a blinking prompt, and it said insert data disk. And I asked the teacher, I was like, what's a data disk? And she said, I don't know. Go talk to the principal. And so I went to the principal's office and I said, the computer says to insert a data disk. What is that? And he said, I don't know. But he gave me a floppy disk. I mean, all I wanted to do was play the Oregon Trail because that's my generation. I'm the Oregon Trail generation. And I didn't know how any of that worked, but he gave me a disk. It did nothing because it was a blank disk. Nobody in the building knew how to operate the only computer in the building. And I learned that if I hit the reset button, there's a little button on the Apple that said reset. If you hit it, it would drop you into a basic terminal. And you could enter commands in the basic programming language, and you could essentially write software into memory. And so I remember creating Mad Libs as like my first thing I ever wrote. You have a story with holes in it, you prompt for nouns, verbs, adjectives, whatever, and then it spits out the story with the blanks filled in. And so I learned about variables and prompts and input and all that stuff. And I didn't think anything of it. I had no idea that that skill was going to be useful. It was just fun. And um, I made it all the way to college and never really realized that being a software developer was something you could do. It's so sad. It's so sad. And maybe you can relate being a Midwestern boy. How big a town did you grow up in?
Sioux City, so
Okay.
not
I was born
small.
in Sioux City. So you grew up in Sioux City. Um, I lived near Lincoln Elementary, Grandview area,
I think that's where my dad
and
went to school.
that's awesome. That's funny. I was just in Sioux City about a year ago. My grandmother had passed. She lived in Morningside,
Yeah.
but that was the first time I've been there in a while, and I don't know when I'll be back to Sioux City. But it was. We drove by my old house on Grandview Park by St. Luke's Hospital, and it was absolutely crazy because I'm the second child of five, and my parents had kids pretty young, and so five tiny babies in this tiny little house on Grandview Park. It was nuts to be there and see that. That's where I lived until kindergarten. But anyway, we were really on a tangent. I was talking about software and how it's one of my loves and how I'm very interested in your challenge. And I was going to add that, what was I going to add? Something about Visual Basic. Oh, yes. It's a technical question. Since you're like a math competent person and I'm not, one assignment that I learned from Visual Basic, or one assignment I had to do in my Visual Basic class was generate, like, build a prime number generator. Do you know what the algorithm is for a prime number generator? Like, I have the only solution I could come up with is to like make a convoluted series of rules. Like, does it end in five or two? No.
Well,
Does it?
uh, hmm. My understanding of prime numbers is that they are only divisible by themselves and 1.
Correct.
So, um, hmm. I mean, it's kind of a given that everything's going to be divisible by itself. So, I suppose one method would be to try uh, mod. I think that's the operation where you look for leftover.
Yeah.
Do division
Yeah.
by 2, 3, and 5, and 7. And I believe if you get a mod out of that, no, because that would not appropriately check. No, I think you would need to see that you have mod for everything, because if it's not divisible by 3, 5, or 2, 3, 5, or 7, you would have a remainder. And if you have a remainder for all of them, then that number is a prime number.
That's an interesting idea. I don't know what the solution is, because I feel like it's a fractal where, like, why did you stop at seven? You know, is it
Um,
11 a prime and 13 a prime? Like, don't you have to try every prime? Like, essentially, if it's not divisible by any prime before it, it's a prime number. I really don't know the answer to this, so I'm not trying to put you on
yeah,
the
I'm
spot.
trying because
I just remember suffering.
I know I don't remember. I think 0 is not a prime number because it's 0 and it's weird. I Depending on the definition I've heard, 1 can technically not be considered a prime number because it is only divisible by 1, and technically not
Sure.
divisible by itself because itself is 1, which defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
2, any even number will automatically be divisible by 2. I suppose you can automatically reject any even number because it will always
There
be
you
divisible
go.
by 2.
Yeah.
3 is the next lowest common multiple. 4 is divisible by 2, it's even. 5 is the next odd number. And then 7. 8 is divisible by 8 is even, it's divisible by 2. 9 is divisible by 3.
Yeah.
7 is the last single digit where it is indivisible by. It is only divisible by 7 in itself.
All right. So I like this algorithm. So we can throw out anything that ends in zero or two or five, um, or any multiple of two.
Uh,
Well, no.
anything that is anything that ends in 0 ends or 2, 4, 6, or 8 because they would be all even and thereby divisible by 2.
Okay.
Oh, and 5 because anything ending in 5 will also be divisible by 5. So
Yes.
that definitely does help narrow it down quite a bit.
So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 5 can all be thrown out. And I would gonna say 9, but 19 is a prime.
Yeah, 19
So
is a prime.
you can't throw out 9.
All right.
So that helps a lot because now we can skip huge chunks of our testing.
Yeah, you just automatically reject those numbers. And then whenever you have
Yep.
a number, you just do that division test, see if it's divisible by 3 or 7. And if you
Huh.
get a remainder for either of those, then it is not divisible by 3 or 7. And it is obviously prime.
Huh. All right. Well, that would have saved me hours. So thanks for not knowing me before you were born, because that would have really helped.
Well, even so, if I was born around that time, I still probably would have been just a baby. So I don't think I'd have been very helpful.
Oh, well, one other strong memory I have from Visual Basic was there was a blind student in my class, and I thought that was the most profound thing that I had ever seen in my life up to that point is to, I think staring at code, like I've learned to love it because it's very satisfying to create things in software. But I couldn't imagine, like, I think it's hard enough to interpret code as a seeing person. I couldn't imagine needing a Braille reader to be my only interface or a screen scraper. It's like, what would the robot voice be telling you? Like, if parenthesis I equals nine semicolon, it would just be the most brutal experience of your life, I would think, to try to read code through a Braille or voice interpreter. But I don't know. My impression was he was a very skilled developer, uh, but it blew my mind. It's like I couldn't imagine doing this without vision. Now that I'm old and my vision's starting to struggle, I'm like I actually wonder how many more years I can contribute it's just hard to stare at the screen.
Well, don't worry, we got surgeries and LASIK and all that stuff for that.
Yeah, that's right. Science again. It's back in the conversation.
As one of my friends had said, have faith that things are going to get better. And while I might not be a very religious person, I can agree that, on average, things have been getting better.
Yeah. I think there's enough people that want there to be a better experience out there that the challenge isn't to carry it all yourself. I think the challenge is to do what you're doing, which is try to meet other interesting people because in my experience, they are out there and they blow your mind. And the more you have your mind blown, the more possibilities you can imagine. And I think that's really the secret to all of it. Um, I struggled a lot for a long time to try to prove myself. And, as a 40 something year old man now, I'm finally starting to accept that I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I just need to do what seems important and that is fulfilling. Um, and who cares? you know, I don't have a million followers. I don't have an audience that I will upset. And that's not my goal. My goal is to change as many lives as I can in my circle of influence. And yeah, I just am so grateful to have been able to have that I don't know, mind opening, heart opening experience. Like, yeah, there are people out there. Um, you can learn from them. It's not important that you know how it all works. It's just important that you're making your contribution and you're meeting other people who are perhaps even better at what you're trying to do than you are. I'm going to geek for a little bit as a professor here and share a philosophy on adult development. And it says that there are these different stages, and this can be credited to several different researchers from different fields, whether it's higher ed or organizational development. But there are a couple different staged models. One by Bill Torbert, one by what's her name? It's a hyphenated name. Oh, I should have it in front of me so I don't misquote it. I think it's like Catherine Cook Gruder, perhaps, and then um, Lisa Leahy and I think it's Michael Keegan have another developmental model. But they're all similar in the sense that they say throughout your life, you have the chance to sort of have a quantum leap. So if you think to chemistry and think about electron fields around an atom, and you increase an energy level that allows the electron to jump to the cloud further away from the nucleus. And I don't know that a lot of people understand chemistry enough to follow that metaphor, but that's how I think of it. In a developmental or psychology perspective, it's like throughout life, some of these models say you start in a socialized space where you're just learning to follow the rules and fit in. And then somehow you choose to grow out of that and leap into a space where you can say, no, I have an opinion on this. And I challenge the rules. And perhaps I'm viewed as a heretic or a troublemaker, but I see different possibilities than what have been shown to me. And so I feel energized and motivated to challenge the structures that have been given to me. And then there's yet another evolution beyond that that might say, um, I have these strong convictions. I challenge structures in this way, but I can look at them objectively and say, maybe I'm not right about this. I welcome the possibility that I'm wrong, but I'm still convicted about it. So this is when I was lecturing about the struggle that science has brought to the world and how even though we've advanced a lot, we've also caused harm. Does that mean I don't believe in science anymore? Like, no. It just means I'm looking objectively at the process of scientific discovery and I'm saying that there's risk involved and we need to be aware of it. And so in these different developmental models, some are 3 stages, some are 7, some are 5, a couple truths go across the research. One truth is that fewer and fewer people complete the quantum leap as you go through the hierarchy. So that at the end, even beyond the objective viewpoint group, they're sort of the social change people. They're the people that really are pushing society, the greatest change makers in society are sort of at this other echelon. That there are very, very few people that ever finish or land in that place. Most people don't really get to the challenging the structures growth. So that's one thread that goes through all of it. And another important thread, which is why I started this rant, is that there seems to need to be somebody to pull you up into that next quantum range. To help you take that quantum leap, it can go very rapidly, but you generally need someone who's standing on that next step to reach down and say, hey, check it out from this point of view. It's pretty cool up here. And so for a really, really long time, and I'll let you respond to this because it's some big stuff I just threw out. For a really, really long time, I was stuck in trying to be good enough. I was stuck in trying to master the things so that I could enter the world with confidence. Because if I was good enough, perfect enough, brave enough, courageous enough, whatever, then I could say these things and I wouldn't care what anyone said because I've earned it. I understand it all. And with that point of view, it's really limiting because the unfortunate truth is we will never have enough. We will never have enough of the perspective to appease that voice inside of us. Every PhD that has opened their hearts and minds to me has shared, Matthias, we're not really that different. I've just read a lot more than you. I'm just further down the road. Better than you at this. None of us are. And so through this lens, of doing what you're doing, of talking to interesting people, you might have a chance to make this quantum leap up into the next level where you can look at the perspective that you're carrying and decide, where can I go next with this? Is this enough for what I need? Can I engage with the level of knowledge that I have? And what would it take for me to be able to grow the way I look at things so that I can show up and be as impactful as I want to be? Because we can't solve global warming. We can't fix the problems that you identified at the start of the call um, by waiting to be smart enough or not engaging because we're not there yet, or by looking at the problem through the same tired lens that is just shoved down our throats every day. So let me pause there. That was a really long rant, but the
And I'm
key
going to say
is,
this recording has been
yeah,
going on for 50 minutes, though it's probably not going to be quite 50 minutes. There's probably going to be a little bit of editing down.
okay, that's good.
But um, I think uh, this should be a good part one. I say we've introduced each other pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
Um, I think I'd like to have you come back and actually go ahead
sure,
and tell some stories. Because it doesn't feel like you
okay.
really did stories. We more just explored philosophy and also probably
Sure.
solved someone's computer science homework.
Maybe. I don't know if our answer is worth an A, but it's a lot better algorithm than I wrote.
That's probably a solution. I mean, as long as the test passed. Yes, well, uh,
Uh,
yes. Thank you. I do look forward to our next interview. We'll have to discuss when to set that up. And I do hope that
yeah,
our philosophy has inspired somebody. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you're leaving me hanging here, though, man. I just gave you a whole bunch of perspective, and I'm wondering, like, what's resonating from that exploration. There's a lot there.
Oh, you want to know what's resonating? What's
Yeah.
resonating is, well, funnily enough, today it happened to be a career fair in college, so I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find a job, and I'm going to hopefully find something that can allow me to do some good in the world.
Yeah, that's good. And for your first job, they kind of want you to be in the socialized mind. They kind of want you to be in the we're going to give you technical challenges that you can solve. And I just have a feeling that that your mind and curiosity is a little bigger than that. So I think that it would serve you if I could project, even though I don't know you. It might serve you to try to come up with some questions to help tease out how do you look at developing employees if they have interests or ambitions, you know, how do you support them pursuing them? Or is this a job where you need to show up and do your job? Or is this an organization that really wants to breed innovation and creativity and collaboration? Because I think that if you do have a curious mind and you do want to try to tackle some of these bigger challenges, it will require some of those mental models to be developed. And not everybody's ready for that from an employer perspective. So I don't know that I can help, but I'm trying to be helpful in the sense that it's okay if you find that organizations really just want people to do work. That might just not be the organization for you.
Hmm.
And there are other people out there.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, thank you. Um, all right. Matthew, uh, Mathias Gran. I am saying your name right, by the way.
I go by Matthias, but that's all right.
Matthias. Matthias
Yeah,
Gran.
yeah.
Well, thank you for showing up.
Hey, thank you for showing up and continue to show up. And parting thought, do you own Bill Gates' book on how to avoid a climate disaster?
No, I do not.
Well, I think it reads as dry as Bill Gates is, and I think your engineering mind might be excited by it. So it's a little bit of a dry read, but you know, here's a guy who's out there trying to eradicate polio, trying to find ways to give clean water to people who don't have water sanitation, access to clean drinking water. You know, he's just a mind that looks at big problems, and so you might find solace in reading his stuff. because his mind might work like yours.
Oh, we shall see. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome, Alex.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right.